I'm Joyce Lights. I'm Executive Director of Connecticut Audubon Society, and I wanted to thank you for joining us this evening and for signing up for our Migration Magic event. We are super excited this year that we've extended the event to the entire month of May, and we hope that you've been enjoying the Great Migration this first week. Well, last week was the first week. I mean, the fallout last week was amazing. Just as we were launching into May, and so we've already started getting over 100 species seen by several of our birders. But I'm really expecting that this will be a great month of fun activities, programs, and walks. And Matt's going to give us a great overview of how to use eBird and how to connect with our trip reports, so that we can be monitoring. Just a quick thank you to all of our sponsors of Migration Magic. WSHU Radio is our official media sponsor, Wells Fargo Advisors, Aquarian, Oak Lawn Cemetery, and Arboretum, where we are doing a walk in the coming week. Gall Excavating and Native Plants, OMG, and Purple Air are all sponsors, and they are all making sure that we're able to bring this to you and connect with you throughout the entire month. I'm going to transfer over to Matt and let him give you the overview of eBird. Thanks, Matt.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I hope everyone's been having a great time out birding so far. And yes, we're going to focus today on eBird. For those of you who may not know exactly what eBird is a citizen science database built by Cornell, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, for gathering bird data. Now, it works primarily as a listing service because that's how they get all the birders to enjoy using it. But all the data that's used, or that we've supplied to it, is used in citizen science and research. I think over 200 papers have been published using eBird data. Now, we have a couple of things to go over tonight, but basically how to use eBird to the best of our capabilities. For how to find birds, how to find where to go birding, how to submit those birds, and more. But before we start, I'm going to show what accepting a trip report should look like on your screen. So if you're not on the trip report yet, we have sent that link out to people. When you click on it and open it, you'll get a screen that looks like this. Now, this is not the trip report for Migration Magic. This is one for an upcoming eco travel trip. But you'll see a screen just like this that has the name, and I'll show the Migration Magic one shortly. But at the top, you'll see you have been invited to join this trip report option. And you're going to want to click on the Join Trip Report option in the upper right-hand corner. And once you join that, it'll take you to a screen that asks you to manage your checklists. You can adjust your personal dates if you so choose, but there's no reason to. The max they can do is 31, so that's the full length of May. And then once you have accepted that, you hit Save and View Trip Report, and then bam, you're in there. Now, what does that mean? For example, if we want to look at the Migration Magic Trip Report, what it looks like currently. Let me switch screens here. We will see a screen that looks like this, and you'll see Migration Magic 2024, and you'll see where all the checklists have been submitted from. Now, yes, there are some outliers in Florida, so we have to reach out to that person to remove those checklists, which I'll show how to do in a second. But further going through the trip report, you'll see that there's been 183 species, 299 checklists, 74 photos, and 5 with audio. Now, you can also break it down by individual person. So, for example, if you wanted to see me, you scroll all the way down to me, and you can see there, I've seen 140 species so far across 31 checklists, and you can see all the individual species I've seen here. Now, we'll go into more detail of the trip report later, but first and foremost, how to find a place to go birding using eBird. Now, at the upper bar here, you'll see some options. You'll see Submit, Explore, and My eBird, and then these other tabs that aren't necessary for what we're doing. To find a place to go birding, you would go to the Explore tab. And under the Explore tab, you'll see a bunch of different options here. You'll see Explore Species, Explore Regions, and then more ways to explore a species map. Hotspots, those are the main ones that you would use. Now, you could choose to type Connecticut in here. And if you were to type in Connecticut, you'll see a screen that recently changed. eBird released this new update just a couple weeks ago. So of course, just in time for Migration Magic. And you can see actually that someone had great cormorants on May 4th. I had not heard about that. But you'll see what's recently been seen this month. So already in May, 210 species have been recorded in Connecticut across 2,664 checklists with 877 people. So a pretty good coverage for a small state. Now, this is good to supply yourself with just some general information, where some recent checklists and such. But to really find where you want to go birding, you're going to want to look at hotspots. Now, this is also accessible back from that first page I showed you. So a quicker way to get to it is just to simply hit the Explore Hotspots button here. But when you click on that or the other link that I just had, you'll see a map of the world. Now, again, you can narrow it down the location in Connecticut, and it will zoom in Connecticut, and will load up all the Connecticut hotspots. And it's a heat map, so the colder the colors, the less species there all time. The brighter and warmer, the more species. So we can see that down here. Here's Milford Point at Connecticut Islands property, 317 species all time. That's a pretty colorful thing. However, these numbers, as we can see up top, are year-round, all years. So for the sake of May, where we're out birding, trying to see where the best place to go in May is, the best thing you could do is narrow this custom range down to May. And once you hit set date range, you don't necessarily want to go to current year because that just skews the data even more. Now it changes, it zooms out a little bit and changes some colors, but when we zoom in, you can again see that the colors are a little different, but still the coastline, Hamnasset right here, Milford Point, Sherwood Island, and Greenwich Point Park are still some of the top locations along the coastline. So from there, you can even narrow it down even farther. So for example, I live in Vernon. So if I want to see where some good places to go birding are in Vernon, I can zoom in even farther in my area and notice that there are some good points. Station 43 in South Windsor over here, but some other local parks, Valley Falls, which is my local patch, Belding, and then Bolton Notch State Park. Now, by clicking on a hotspot, and for this sake, I'm going to most likely use the general Hamnasset hotspot here. When you click on a pin, you get this little screen that shows you how many species all time in May, etc. Now, the view details is the best thing you can do to see the overarching screen, just like we saw for Connecticut as a hotspot. And we can see that Frank Mantlick was there today. Frank is participating in Migration Magic and had a redneck grebe, which is an incredibly good bird, and some long-tailed ducks, both of which are new for Migration Magic this month. And I believe the redneck grebe would be new overall for the last couple of years. From this screen, again, you can see recent things that have been seen. Scroll down, you can see recent checklists. Apparently I am kicked off. You could see more recent checklists and audio. The best thing to look at is up on the left side where it says bird list. Now, the bird list shows you all the birds, not just this recent thing, that have been reported recently and their numbers. And this is helpful. These little green comments on the side either explain the identification that the birder wrote in their comments, which you will be asked for in certain occasions, such as roseate tern. If you were to click on the date that we see here, it would open the full checklist. So we can see that Frank was there at noon, spent 4 hours, went almost 5 miles and birded all over and got 55 species. You can scroll through and look at this. Oh, he had some purple sandpipers as well. Good to see they're still around. And you can scroll through and see everything he saw. Now, one of the important things, and I'm going to explain this again later, is some of these birds are not necessarily easy to see. So what might be on a checklist is not necessarily something you're going to be guaranteed to see when you're there. So the best thing that I suggest using is this feature called Illustrated Checklist. Now, when you click on Illustrated Checklist, it brings up this screen that shows you all the species that have been reported all time. So the best thing you can do is narrow this custom time period down to the month of May all time, and that will lower the species count. And then you'll see these bar charts with species imagery, etc. And if you highlight over the individual bars, it'll show you the likelihood. And the likelihood is based off the percentage of checklists submitted during a 1 week span. So the first week of May, second, third, and fourth, for example. So Canada goose occurs on between 40 and 50% of all checklists. So you know it's a pretty good place to go see Canada geese. Now, something like wood duck, someone might have a wood duck, but you probably are better off looking for them elsewhere because you only have a 0.2% chance of seeing them at Hammonasset. Now, some other species, and let me find a good example. I think purple sandpiper is probably going to be the best one I can use. Actually, these long-tailed duck and hooded merganser are good. You can see how long-tailed duck kind of hits this week and then disappears. So that is saying, hey, now is your time. You know, don't put off to the end of the month if you want to find a long-tailed duck. You probably want to look for it now. Same with common goldeneye, not many around. Actually, the last one reported in May was in 2008, so pretty unlikely. But even for red-breasted merganser, you can see they're very common in the winter, occurring on approximately 50% of all checklists, but then right around now, they start to really disappear. So understanding how to read these bar charts, if you want to find something, is one of the most important things of using the feature that eBird has. Now, bar charts are not always helpful. They're helpful at locations where there's a lot of reports. But if you pick something, if we go backtrack all we want to the hotspot view in general, you may find something. Let's find a good example. Let's pick Selden Creek. So Selden Creek has 5 checklists all time. So if you were to go into the illustrated checklist, you're going to see an incredible lack of data. So that's not to mean that birds aren't going to be there, obviously. It just means it's not a location that birders necessarily go looking for a certain target. So bar charts are good at places, especially along the coast, some of the inland parks, etc. If you're just trying to figure out what you can see at a singular location. So using eBird in that matter is one way. The way I personally primarily look for something is using the species map. And this is what I think is the underrated feature of eBird. A lot of people don't utilize this feature. And basically the species map looks just like the hotspot map, but doesn't have any colors on it. And again, I'm going to set it right now to, we'll do year-round current year to start. So, and we'll zoom in on Connecticut. And then we'll pick a species. Say, someone mentioned earlier before in Canada warbler. So you type in Canada warbler, and then on the side here, I always check the show points sooner, so you don't have to zoom in too far. But it shows you everywhere that Canada warbler has been seen so far this year. So because it's a recently arrived migrant, all the pins are red. If there was a blue one, it would be more than 30 days ago. So red is within the last 30 days, blue is outside. Anything with a flame on it is a hotspot. So just like we had just seen on the hotspot map, these locations occur on the map. Anything with just a normal pin is someone's personal location. So it might be their yard, it might be restricted access property that they don't want to have public, stuff like that. And you can click on any of these locations. So we can click on, bam, Deb, who's on this call today, had a Canada warbler at Birdcraft today. So if we wanted to see more of that checklist, we would click on this and it would open up the checklist and we could see everything that she saw, the time, if she had put any notes, etc. Now, that's good to see what's currently here, right? So if we were to, again, pick up something like piping plover, we would see, oh, all on the shoreline, and you can see some of these blue dots. So Bluff Point, there was one back in early March, but hasn't been one since. The other way you can use it is if we were to change the date range to be May and May, and do probably past 10 years, just not to skew data with all years, and then pick a species that isn't necessarily here yet. So something like Acadian flycatcher is a late arriving migrant. We would see everywhere in the past 10 years in the month of May that Acadian flycatchers have been reported. And then you can kind of investigate from there. We can see that, oh, there's a nice grouping of them down in the Salem area. And you can zoom in and then you can start clicking around. Now, something like Nahantic has one report every couple of years or a handful, so it may not be a super reliable spot. Then you pick something like Devil's Hop Yard, and all of a sudden it's up every year on a pretty consistent basis around the same dates. So if I want to go look for Acadian flycatcher, this might be something like Devil's Hop Yard. About
Hey,
this,
Matt, just
yep.
quick question for you. So
Yep.
can everybody who's participating, can you just enter your experience level in eBird? So there may be people here who just want to know, hey, once I accept the trip report, how do I get my lists in? And
that's the next step.
And then we probably have people who are like, how do I find that special bird in the state, which is where you're at right now.
Yep.
Let's
So I'm getting to that. So basically, it's once you pick an area where you want to go birding or pick a place where you want to go see, then you start keeping track of the birds once you get to a location, etc. Now, then you have two options, and I'll get to the phone app in a second, because a lot of people do use that. But one of the best ways you can do it is submit data through the website, and you would go to submit, and you would pick a location. So I'll just pick my Valley Falls Park right down the street from my house, and you would hit continue. And then you have to answer these questions. Observation date. So say I went today. Today's the 6th, right? Yes. And then you have these options here. Now, the three options you would use in everyday birding would be traveling, stationary, or incidental. Historical would not be used. Incidental is something, say you were out weeding your garden and you had something fly over that was, or staying in your yard that was new for your migration magic list, you would submit an incidental list. But if you were actively birding and searching, you would do traveling or stationary. Now, these red asterisks make it guaranteed, and you have to supply this information. So if you were to do incidental, you don't have to necessarily put your time or party size. But if you picked stationary, you would have to do start time, how long it was, and party size. And if you did traveling, you would do start time, duration, how far you went, and party size. Now, once you fill this information in, so for the sake of not having to put all this in, I'm going to do incidental. You would be greeted with a screen that looks similar to this. And you would go through and you could put the exact number that you saw, which is what eBird recommends. The best thing you can do for data is to keep an exact number or to put an estimate. If you're unsure, if you saw a large flock of geese, for example, and you don't want to estimate it, then you would put an X, which simply means the bird was there. I saw Canada geese. I can't tell you how many, but I saw Canada geese. And you would go through the whole list, putting in your numbers, this, that, and the other thing. And then at the end, you have this question here. Are you submitting a complete checklist of the birds you were able to identify? Now, for an incidental list, it's guaranteed to be no, because it's not your primary purpose. But if you were doing traveling or stationary and you submitted everything, then you would submit yes. So I'm not going to submit a list because I obviously wasn't there, but I'll show you what these two lists look like. So for example, I'm going to show you two of my recent lists. So actually these are both incidentals. So I was at Hammonasset this morning quickly, and I submitted a stationary list, and it was incomplete because I just put the birds that I thought were notable, or for me, the roseate tern, which was new for my Migration Magic list. In comparison, you can see my Milford Point list from yesterday, where you will see I submitted a complete list. So I submitted every bird I saw, and some, like Brant, semi-palmated plover, Dunlin, least, Sanderling, were estimated numbers because I didn't want to put an X. I had a good idea of what I was seeing. And you'll also see on my screen right now, you're going to see this track that was made using the app. That is not viewable to the public. So if we were not logged into my account, you would not be able to see the track that I made. That's a safety thing. So some people might ask, I don't want someone seeing where I went. Only person who can see that is you. So that's how, very simply, whenever you submit a checklist, there's nothing else you need to do for the trip report. That checklist will immediately, I should say that, immediately show up within the trip report here. So since we've been sitting here, look, people have been submitting some more checklists. But it will not, you won't need to come in and add anything. You won't need to change anything. The only time you would need to change anything is if you're out of state. So like we have a Florida checklist, we have a couple New York checklists, etc. So to backtrack, we're on the Explore page. This is how you find where you go birding or species you want to target. You submit with one way with the Submit tab on the website. This third tab that I hop in and out of is My eBird, and that shows you everything. So this shows you my United States list, my total species, etc. This whole page is, again, only viewable to you. But on this left-hand side, you'll see Manage My, and there's a trip report button. So you click on that, it pulls up all your trip reports, and you would click on Migration Magic, and that's how you get to it. Now, say you submitted a list out of state. For example, I have a day trip coming up in a couple weeks that goes to Fisher's Island, which is in New York. I'll be submitting eBird lists, but I won't want them on the trip report. So under this Edit button, you'll see a Manage Checklist, and that's your personal thing, and you can check and uncheck very easily, remove and quickly remove checklists that might be from out of state. I know this is a lot of information. That's why we're recording it. You can go back through and check everything out. Now, submitting through the website, like I said, is one way to do it, but a lot of people in this day and age use the app. So I'm going to attempt
Matt, we do
to
have a
share.
question.
Yep.
We have somebody who said that they don't have an eBird account and they don't have a smartphone, but they wanted to know how they could estimate their distance, or are they able to bypass that entry to get to the next species page? So they're not going to be able to use a smartphone app.
Yep. Yeah, so back when I first started using eBird, which was long before the app existed, um, and we had to estimate distance. So something that eBird will tell you when you submit a list is it's a one-way, they want a one-way distance. So in theory, if you backtrack, you're supposed to subtract and this, that, and the other thing, which not a lot of people do. Now, what I can say is traditionally, if I pick like a public park that I go to, um, I'll look at a trail map in advance, or if they have one on display and say, I want to walk this trail, does it have a trail distance on it? And then if I walk a loop trail that's a mile, then I just submit my distance as a mile. It's, they say anything really over like 50 yards, you're supposed to submit as traveling. If I'm doing a shorter distance, I may just say stationary. Like if I'm walking from the front of my house to the back of my house, I'm going to make that a stationary list. It's not really traveling. But if I'm going for a walk and I don't feel like uh, starting a list and using the tracking feature, the way I estimate is using something I know the size of. So if I'm walking along a fence, you can estimate how long the fence is, how many fence posts, etc. But it's just you can just do a rough estimate. So the large they suggest checklists be under 3 miles, and not many people do over 3 miles. So just a simple estimate, and it's not going to make or break anything. The researchers have filters and stuff that will correct things, and I've even heard from people at eBird that the backtracking thing is a bit outdated now, because they have something on the back end that can remove that. So let me try here, because like I said, you submitting through the website is one way to do it. If you don't have a smartphone, if you keep records on paper, or if you just want to put something in that's new, that's one way to do it. The other way, and the way a lot of us do it now, is using the eBird app. So this is what the eBird app looks like on your phone if you have it downloaded and are logged in. So when doing a list, like if I get to a birding location, the first thing I do is hit start track, or start checklist. This record track option is always turned on. You can turn it off. It will pop up and recommend you to keep it on. But for example, if I'm doing a stationary list, there's no reason to have it on. It's just going to drain some data. But then when you hit start checklist, you'll be greeted by a screen that looks like this. And you'll see a list of all the species that can be in the area. Now, instead of scrolling through, one of the easiest things you can do is this add observation. And the number one question I ever get when it comes to using this app is, why do the numbers come up before the letters? Because the secret hint of eBird is you can type the number that you saw. So say I have 3 black-capped chickadees. You type the number 3, and then you can type black-capped chickadee and just tap on it, and it automatically adds those 3 to the list. And then if you see 3 more later on, you can do black-capped chickadee again, and bam, all of a sudden it's 6. So that's why the numbers come up. It's so you can quickly type and not spend too much time looking at the phone. Now, if you were just to tap on a species like chickadee, you could actually put the exact number in if you wanted something like that.
So you just did something that somebody asked a question, although they asked after they submit it. So if they make a mistake on here, they can go and they can delete before they submit. But if
Yes.
they make a mistake and they submit a bird that they actually didn't see, how
Yep.
do they fix that after the fact? Do they have to do that on the
Yes.
computer?
You
Or can they do
no,
that?
so you can do that on the app as well, both on the computer and on the app. So so we're just gonna say 3, or I'll put 5 chickadees in, and then you hit, you're done, you put review. It brings up these options. So you can't submit until you choose a location. So you're choosing a location, look at it, it recommends my local area, some of the area hotspots. Oh, hi, my address.
Where you are now is another question we have where
Yeah.
one of our birders asked if she does this when she's home, how does she change her location? So is she able to just type
Yes.
in, search a location, and she could search, I'm going to use Smith Richardson as an option, and if you type Smith
Yeah.
Richardson, she can then use that as her location.
You could. It's recommended to be as close as possible to where you currently are. So as you can see, I have a personal location that's named Bell Household. So it doesn't have my exact location. Now, could you figure it out? Yes. But what you can do is, say I drop a pin at the intersection of the street. It says create location. And then you can type and change the name. So you'll see a lot of people just have home written, or like mine is household, or someone just says private yard, stuff like that. Something else that I haven't
But what if she
tested, and
birded somewhere else and then took a paper list and wanted to enter it when she got home?
yes, yep. So if you birded somewhere else and did a paper list, I would highly suggest submitting through the website, which from the website, I will show that again in a second because I still have that pulled up. But after you, ooh, that's fun. Okay. Again, you would pick your style, stationery, etc. Sneaky thing of this, that, and the other thing, and you continue would lead you to submit it. So I'm not submitting this, but first question I had was editing lists, right? So if you're on the phone and you accidentally submit a species you didn't see, you'll see this checklist tab down here at the bottom, and you can go to submitted, and then you can tap on any of these lists, and then you'll see in the bottom right hand corner it says edit, and it will bring you back to that species list, so you can then remove something or add something, stuff like that. Okay, that was that. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Again, the explore species that we talked about before, the app could have a whole other talk given on, but you see this explore tab down here as well, and that will also show you recently seen locations. So if you wanted to not do research on your phone and just see what's been seen, you can tap on the species and pick something, and when you tap on any other species like wild turkey, it shows you where the wild turkeys in your area have been seen the last couple of days. Again, that's helpful if you're out in the field and you want to target something. But if you're sitting at home and planning a day of birding, I would always use the website. 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100 times, I just use the website to plan trips. There are times when I would use the app, but that is more of a more specific and something with a big lister, like a county lister or a state lister and stuff like that. Now back to the website. We were asked first. Okay, so first, finding a location. So if you came home, the first thing I would do is enter a region. So you'll see this. The regions they use for Connecticut are the counties. So say we said New Haven County, and it would pull up a map. And then from there, you could either zoom in to where you've been or type the name in. So say it was at Milford Point. So you would go to Milford and it brings you in, and then you could zoom in even more and pick the location that way. So you click on the hotspot and find the most accurate one. So either the Milford Point sandbars or the Milford Point CP Audubon, and then go from there. That's how you would pick a location if it was the first time you were birding somewhere. Once you birded and submitted a single checklist from there, it'll pop up in this list that says choose from your locations. So you can see the insane amount of locations I have submitted eBird checklists from, and you'll see quite a few are randomly from roadways with friends in the car. So do not use your phone while driving. Always have someone else do it for you. And then we had the question again about editing a list. So from the computer. So this is my ham and asset list again from this morning. You'll see the checklist tools. Well, actually, you'll see edit species right here. It can also be found under checklist tools, but edit species, you simply click on that, it brings you right back to this screen. I know it's a lot of information. It can be very overwhelming. The best thing I can suggest is just playing around with the Explorer. When I first started doing this years ago, I would pick a hotspot close to my house and just see what people have seen there, gone down there, and seen what I could find. Nothing intense, nothing crazy. Something else, let's see. If you wanted to see what people were seeing on our trip report. So again, if you go back to trip reports, Migration Magic, and you can see all the species here, you'll see the counts, but then you'll also see these numbers on the left or right. Pictures are number of pictures uploaded. The other number is the number of checklists that bird has been reported on, or that species has been reported on. And if you click on any of them, say clapper rail, it'll tell you where people had the clapper rails. So you can see that there were 2 at Hammonasset, Silver Sands. So if you want to see where other people taking part in Migration Magic are seeing a species, that's how you would do it. Now, something I would caution is these numbers on this screen are not accurate. They're cumulative. So the example I'm going to give is this upland sandpiper. There is one upland sandpiper. It is at Hammonasset. It's not 2 birds, it's a single bird. Because 2 of us have seen it, it's showing up as 2 separate birds in the list. However, if you were to go to my list, because I have the upland on it, you would just see it simply say 1. So that's the one downside of paying attention to these numbers, or that's not necessarily the actual number of upland sandpiper seen. For example, I'm trying to see if there's another one. Ooh, more purple sandpipers today. So there was 1 and then 3 and 3. So that is 7, but this one from Hammonasset could very well be one of these 3. So trusting those numbers is questionable. Again, I know this is a lot of information. It seems difficult. It seems daunting, but if you take your time and kind of work through it, like I said, sit down and play around with the Explore, submit a list for your yard. If you were to pick before I round it up, let's go back to New Haven. If you want to put a location that doesn't have a hotspot, say your yard is somewhere in this neighborhood and there's no hotspot, you would simply just click, and then it allows you to name, Frank Mantler, and apparently wants to suggest contacts. But yeah, you can say my household, my house, or private residence, stuff like that. You would never want to suggest it as a birding hotspot. The eBird reviewer will take care of that, but that just would kind of tell birders, hey, you can come to my yard and check out my yard, which you don't necessarily want. Some people do. Joyce, I know there were some more questions. I know it's a lot of information, but
so yeah, and he's talking about birding in your backyard. Birding in your backyard, bird in your local park, bird on your street. But as Matt noted, you can just kind of set a location for it. You don't have to look for a hotspot in order to do a bird report.
correct. It will show up regardless. Now, if you're worried about someone finding your location, the best thing you can do is either select a random, not random per se, but maybe the closest street intersection to your house and drop a pin there, and just say, yard list. Or if you're really concerned, and this comes up sometimes, you can select a large area. So it won't show up in eBird output. It will still show up on the trip report. I did test this the other day. But basically you have to select a full county, New Haven, and you put Connecticut, and then it will not show up on the map. This, I don't recommend doing it because eBird will not use it for data. The only time I do this is for a sensitive bird. So, for example, there are a couple pairs of Mississippi kites in Connecticut that breed, and due to harassment, the locations are kept hidden. So most people submit them at a county level, so they don't occur in alerts. They don't occur on maps. I'm trying to think if I have. I can show you what one of those checklists look like if you bear with me for a split second. I'm going to do something really quick. So you'll see, this is an old list of mine from 2018 back in college, but you'll see on this left-hand side, it says checklist flag location issue. So it will not occur in public eBird outputs. And you also, this won't occur in Connecticut necessarily unless someone finds something really, really good, but you'll sometimes see this flag that says sensitive. Sensitive simply means that that bird does not appear anywhere in eBird. So if you were to go, so this lesser prairie chicken is sensitive. And again, this isn't a bird of Connecticut, but just to show you what eBird would look like, if we look up lesser prairie chicken, you will have this alert that says specific locations are not available for this taxon. And if it wants to properly load the map in, you'll see that there are purple dots, but the farther you zoom in, they do not shrink. So if you ever see something like that, that's just a safety thing to protect the well-being of the bird. You don't see that often in Connecticut. The only bird that we have that has occurred in the last couple of years in Connecticut that is sensitive is black rail. And again, it completely zooms you out and won't show you the exact locations. So even if you hit show points sooner, it just completely hides them.
So
that's yeah.
How to find. So let's say somebody just wants to find a hotspot in their neighborhood. Is there a quick way to find them?
Yes. Yep. So I would go to explore hotspots, and the first thing I would do is type your neighborhood in. Let's go with let's go back to New Haven. It brings us into New Haven. Here are all the hotspots, and again, my one reminder would be just remember that this shows year-round data. So some of these other inland hotspots might not be as good. So I would just change my filter to May. And you can see how the colors all got more muted because a lot of these coastal spots are good, but are much better in fall or winter with ducks. But then you can see what parks are nearby. And again, there are a lot of locations in Connecticut, and I think it's one of the downsides of birding in Connecticut is most of the birders are centered on the coastline. So you'll see a lot of the colorful hotspots are down by the water, and you'll feel like you have to go down to the water to see something. But as someone who birds Talon County, where there's only a very small handful, maybe 5 of us that bird the county regularly, we have, our little spots that we go to. Like I mentioned, my patch before, that we had, back. So the history I can give is Valley Falls, which is right down the street, before COVID hit, had only had like 110 species. And then COVID hit, and 3 of us decided that we were going to go to Valley Falls almost every day to see what was popping up. And we were able to find 20, and then some more were found later, more species that were new to the location that we really expected to be there, but hadn't been reported. So again, that's part of the reason why I would hesitate, trusting some of this data from hotspots. Now, it's great data to have. But just because a species isn't reported somewhere doesn't mean it's not possible to find it there. And I can't stress that enough. If you want, if you're thinking, oh, this looks like a great place to find a wood thrush, but no one's ever reported it there, doesn't necessarily mean it's not there. It just means, especially inland, that there's not a lot of birders covering that area, especially if you live in the northeast corner or the northwest corner. You'll see there's a lot of empty space throughout Woodstock here, for example, but not to say there's not phenomenal birding, like at Boston Hollow, considered one of the best birding spots in Connecticut.
Great. So
any other questions in there, Joyce?
People who have signed up for Birdathon, Allison asked, does eBird hide birds that are endangered or state specific? And you kind of
Yeah, so
covered
it's
that.
so it's hit or miss. They hide a lot of birds internationally. The most common birds that they do hide are not in the US. Those are out in the Indo-Pacific, and they're birds that are popular in the pet trade and are now critically endangered. In the US, they hide specific things that are mostly at risk of harassment. So some owls, for example. And some states have different rules. I've had discussions along with a couple other Connecticut Audubon employees. We've had discussions with eBird about adding certain species, such as northern saw-whet owl, during breeding season only, to that sensitive species list. If you wanted to, in your own time, see what species are sensitive, you would want to go to the help tab. And then somewhere in here, you can search and do sensitive species, and it will give you the full list. And then you could, everything, and whether they're endangered, like Guam kingfisher, sensitive, it's extinct in the wild type of thing. If you really want to go exploring, like great gray owl in the northern US and Canada, stuff like that. And they do have regionally sensitive ones as well. So we could look up, I think we'll pull New York up. Yeah. So you can see that spruce grouse in New York is considered sensitive. King rail in certain areas of New York during breeding season. So yeah, in New York, from March 15th to August 15th, you can't find king rail locations because they're considered a sensitive breeder. Interesting that the Cuban subspecies of king rail is also on the New York list. To each their own.
If there's a bird that's sensitive and someone puts a location and eBird does monitor this, they usually will block a location if they feel that they don't want that bird to
Yes. So yeah, if a bird is already on the sensitive list, it will not be shared. No one will know it's been supported. If you submit a bird that you are worried about, for example, trying to think of one that I have. I can't think of on the top of my head, so I don't want to. I can think of one, but it's still sensitive in Connecticut, so I don't want to pull it up. But if I were to open this list from Milford from yesterday, and just for, under this checklist tools option, you have the option to hide from eBird output. Now, you get this pop-up that says hiding will exclude. It will be considered not public, so they can't review it, this, that, and the other stuff. I don't know if it would show up on trip reports. But it's really staged for specific instances. If you're really worried about a bird, for example, northern goshawk nests in Connecticut are normally hidden, or saw-whet owl nests in Connecticut are normally hidden throughout the breeding season, and then people will do the same thing. So once you hide it, you have a little flag. It says hidden checklist, so you can only view it from the link or the checklist owner. But then when you can go back in and you can unhide it with the same button. I'm trying to think if there's another example, but yeah, so you can willingly hide things. I would not actually, we can test something. What did I get? I got piping plover yesterday. So let me hide from eBird output. And see if it takes the piping plover off my list. Because if it does, no, it did not take piping plover off of my list. Instead, so it still shows your list, so people can still find it through the trip report, which is an interesting feature. I'm going to actually make a note of that and email eBird.
Yes, I don't think that they were just wondering if eBird hides them. But
yeah, so eBird can manually do it. They don't often do that. That's normally for what they would call problematic birders, who they have decided are detrimental to the database. And in order for that to happen, it's a multiple month long process. So I don't think anyone here is at risk. I will say one other thing, because Joyce just mentioned that. You'll see some checklists, like the Upland Sandpiper list, they have written descriptions. So if you were to go to Hammonasset, I'm actually gonna do it this way. If you were to go to Hammonasset, and you wanted to submit the Upland Sandpiper, you would not find it on the list necessarily. So you'd have to add it. And by adding it, it's going to say, this bird is rare for this date and location. Please add comments. And it does the same thing on the app as well. So you basically, what this means is you need to write a description. If you don't have a picture, you need to write a description to why you believe the bird is there. And that's, you'll most likely end up, if you don't write a description, or if someone has a question, Connecticut has 2 reviewers for eBird data. And they will email you. And the thing I cannot stress enough is they are volunteers. They're not emailing you because they don't believe you, this, that, and the other thing. They are just making sure the data is correct. Because again, this ends up being used for citizen science. So making sure that what's reported is correct. And then if you have a photo, let me see. I'm just going to pull up and show an example of what an accepted. There's a couple different ways, but let's see who wants to work. Maybe not. Okay, we'll do it this way. So, oh, yeah. This black-chinned hummingbird that I saw in Connecticut a couple of years ago, under the photo, there's no marker that says unconfirmed. But if we were to go back to that, there are, it would show a yellow caution symbol in this area that says unconfirmed on it. I guess one way to do this is I'm going to show a feature that I don't want to talk, it's complicated, but
yeah, I think we mostly have beginners with us today.
Yeah, I'm just trying to
concerned about making sure that their lists are showing on trip reports.
Yeah, like I said, as long as you accept the trip report and you can see your name. So if you're not sure, that's a good thing. If you're not sure if you've accepted the trip report, open the link, which is either in your email or we can send it again, and see if you're, click on this plus 41 more on the main page, and you can see everyone who's signed up through the trip report. If you don't see your name here, it's not, you haven't accepted it, and we can resend you the link. Some people might ask, why are some names blue and some names gray? That just means those of us with blue names have made our profiles public. So by default, your profile is not public. People can't see you, they can't follow you. But for myself, my profile is not private. Mine is public. So you could see my information. You can't see lots of stuff, but you can see lists and photos and where I've been and stuff like that. But most people don't have that, and that's totally okay, obviously. But if you wanted to have fun and check out other people, you could. But yeah, make sure you're on here, and then as long as you submit a list, it will show up in the trip report. If you run into an issue submitting a list, feel free to email me. That's the best way to reach me, and I can walk you through. And the help page of eBird has a lot of help as well. They can explain some things, all that other stuff. I know we've gone over time, and I'm really sorry there.
The other is you can always email migrationmagic@ctaudubon.org. I will come back in again. Join that.
Oh, yeah, let me stop sharing my screen.
Yeah. So we wanted, you can always email us at migrationmagic@ctaudubon.org. To ask, and we can double check for you and make sure that we're adding you in or sending you a new invitation. Basically, we have to send an invitation. You have to accept the trip invitation. We can't push you into the trip without you doing that. But we can try multiple ways to get you into the trip if you don't see yourself there. So what Matt showed you is look for yourself, and if you're not there, then your list won't automatically be added.
And if you take part in a walk, well, one of our walks, your leaders should be using eBird, and they'll do the list for you and share it to your account. So that would simply, you just have to give them your email or your username, and they will be able to share it directly to you. So the most important thing when out with us on a trip, whether it's an eco travel trip or a walk at Milford or Deer Pond Farm or RTP, enjoy yourself, see the birds, and let the leader worry about keeping that checklist for you. And then they will just, ask them to share it, and they will gladly do that.
And check out the Migration Magic website, because as Matt noted, those programs that are throughout the month of May are a great way for you to build on your sighted birds, and also to be able to spot more new birds. Our program leaders are really good birders, and they're also really patient about making sure that you know how to find the bird, where you should be looking, and what you're looking for. So I guarantee you will learn a lot. We are at 7:30.
I would also say go out birding Thursday morning. Thursday morning looks like a good morning. Looks like it'll be a good morning.
Oh, is Birdcast showing a good bird influx?
Yeah.
So yeah, a couple of rainy days, and then usually if you start getting nice weather, you'll have a pretty good birding period. And watch Birdcast, Matt, and our team monitors for Birdcast, which kind of shows what the bird migration is looking potentially like. Sorry, my dog is like wandering behind me. Just want to thank everybody. If you haven't signed up for Migration Magic, please do. There's some great prizes. The lead prize is a raffle item, but it's a picture that's valued at about $1,500, and it's stunning. I wish I could win it, but I can't because I'm a staff member. So your odds are pretty good, because we take out all our staff from being eligible to win on the raffle prize. And you see 50 birds in the month and raise $50. Your $10 registration fee goes towards that. It's a great fun way for you to be in a raffle, a really tight raffle, to win an amazingly beautiful piece. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us again, migrationmagic@ctaudubon.org. Ask any questions. We will do everything we can to answer them and make sure that you're in and working in eBird, which, as Matt noted, thank you, Matt, for leading this conversation. It's a citizen science project, so while we're using it for our birdathon information, you're also collecting data on migrating birds in the state of Connecticut throughout the month of May. And so your data is, while you're having fun, you're also sharing information that is part of an international study. So thank you.
And if you're out birding and you run into me, because as you can see, I'm out birding a lot, please say hi.
And watch for our team on May 13th, because they're doing the big day. So Matt, Deb, Stefan, and Joe will be out for a 24-hour period of time to try and see 150 species of birds. And we will be posting on social media where they're showing up next.
Yep, we'll be doing live updates. So if you want to see how crazy we can get, you'll be impressed.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.